Hi everyone. In this video, I'm going to provide a demonstration of how you can use dropping or subsetting of variables to create a smaller data frame out of a larger data frame. And we're just going to be focusing in on creating a smaller set of variables that were originally contained in a larger data frame. So what I've done is I've created just a little script file up here in the top of in RStudio. Basically, I just went to File, New File, clicked on R Script right here, and then this script opens up. Basically, it was blank, and then I added in some code in order to create a data frame. And then what we're going to do after I kind of briefly talk through this is we'll go through the process of dropping variables or subsetting them just to show you how this all works together. So just briefly looking at our data right here, you can see our script right here. You can see that in line 2, I'm creating a case identifier. So imagine that let's say that we have 10 students who have measures of interest, mastery goals. We have a variable reflecting the state that they live in, and then year reflecting their year in high school. So what I've done is I've set up the first variable, case ID, and you can see this is just basically going to be a single vector of values. We've got a less sign followed by a hyphen, excuse me, that's our arrow that you see. And then I've got 1:10 so that we can assign case identifiers to those individuals, basically running from 1 to 10. Then the next line right here, I've got interest. So I've typed in interest. This is another variable that's going to be in the data set. And you can see that we've got, in this particular case, we have our arrow followed by the C or combined function. And inside the parenthesis, these are the values of that particular variable separated by commas, and also in the order in which those cases appear in the data set. So basically, this would be the interest score for person 1. This would be the interest score for person 10. Then we have this variable that we're creating, which is mastery. And you can see, again, we're using the C function with scores on mastery goals for persons 1 through 10. And then I'm creating another variable, which is state. And for this one, we're making this a factor variable. So I've got factor right here on the outside of the exterior parentheses. Then I've got the C function right here, and inside these parentheses right here, basically we have the states in quotation marks and separated by commas. And so that's just kind of registering again each state that that a student is from. Then we've got one last variable, which is this year variable. So I'm setting this up. We've got basically, once again, we're using this factor function right here. But in this case, I went ahead and entered using the C function right here. I entered values of 1, 2, 3, and 4. And what I want this to do is, let's say if I want to, when I'm running my analysis, I want labels of freshmen, sophomore, juniors, or seniors to appear instead of just 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then in this particular case, I can use the levels and labels arguments in this syntax. So again, I'm using the C function to enter the values representing essentially the year for students 1 through 10, and then I have a comma. Then I'm using this levels argument here, setting that equal to, and then inside the parenthesis with the C function on the outside right here, or the C combined function, we have 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we're basically setting that equal to freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors over here. And these are the labels that would appear. So that's kind of the structure that we have. And then finally, if I want this variable to be treated as ordered categorical, I have another comma in here, and then I'm using the ordered argument and setting that equal to true. So in a nutshell, all of these are just basically single vectors where we're entering our data in, and then I want to combine it into a data frame. So that's what I'm doing right here. I'm creating a data frame, which I'm calling DF. And so I'm using the data.frame argument followed by, inside the parenthesis, the names of each of the variables that I've created above with their respective data, and then also separated by commas. So if I highlight all of this and click on the Run button right here, now you can see that we get, everything has been run. And if I type in DF, I want to take a look at the data frame. I can just highlight that and click Run. And you can see that now we've got our data frame. We've got case ID, interest, mastery, state, and year all are given. If we want to take a quick look at the structure of this data frame, we'll type in STR and inside parenthesis DF and click on Run right there. And so there you have it. So really quickly, I do want to mention too that I know this, I've kind of gone through this really quickly, but all of this, I'm going to incorporate a couple of files or links to a couple of files underneath the video description. So you'll be able to download that if you want to kind of study up on what I just did in a little bit more detail. So at this point, now let's look at the possibility of creating, data frames with a subset of the variables that I've created and that are stored in the data frame called DF. So we'll start off with just dropping two variables from this data frame. So I'm going to actually create a little comment here, and I'm going to call it dropping two variables right here. And the way that we can do this, there's a couple of options. One of them is that we can essentially, reference the columns in the data frame that we want to drop, and then that will leave us with a data frame with the remaining variables in it. So let's say, for argument's sake, I want to create a new data frame. I'll call it DF2. Just not being very creative. So I'm going to create a new data frame where I'm going to drop two variables from the original data frame, which we called DF. So in this case, I'll type in DF2, and then I have an arrow pointing from it. And then we've got DF, and then we're going to use a bracket. And the bracket helps us to identify the variables. Basically, the variables are in columns. And theoretically, we could also use this to help identify rows as well. So basically, the first position is essentially representing rows. And if I have a comma, the second position is representing columns. So now if I want to drop two columns, let's say I want to drop the interest variable and the state variable. Well, those are columns 2 and 4. So to drop those two columns, I can type in C, use the C function right here, and type in -2, -4. So we have columns 2 and 4, which represent interest and also state. So if I want to drop those columns and then save what remains to the data frame DF2, then in a nutshell, I just have to add in a minus sign in front of those. And so I'll also just go ahead and show you what it would look like if just by kind of requesting that data frame show up as well. So we'll go ahead and highlight this first and run it. And then we'll look at the data frame yet again. So if I highlight DF2, you'll see that now we are missing the interest variable and the state variable that were previously in the original data frame. So that's how simple it actually is. So another possibility, let's say that we want to identify variables for dropping just by name. Well, another option might be to do the following. Now, the original data frame, we'll just take a quick look at it, was our DF named data frame, excuse me. And if we highlight that, you can see we have all 4 of our columns represented. So if I want to drop two variables from this, and an option for doing that is to type in DF and then reference each of the variables I want to drop. So let's say I want to drop interest. So I'm going to use the $ interest right here, and then follow it up with an arrow. And then I'll type in DF $state if I want to drop state as well. And then I can do the same thing. Let's say I want to drop years as well. So I'll type in DF, which is the name of my data frame, and then $, and then the year variable as well. Then we'll follow this up with an arrow, and then we'll type null. Okay, so when I do that, if I highlight this and I run it, you'll see that, obviously we don't see what shows up right here, but if I go back and I type in df again, then in this particular case, you'll see that we have dropped those other variables from our original data frame. Now, let's say that we want to, instead of dropping variables from our original data frame, let's say that we want to add variables, or basically kind of subset out variables. So basically creating a new data frame where we select variables for inclusion in that data frame. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up here, and I'm just going to actually copy it and paste it down here. And we're going to reconfigure, restructure our original data frame that contains all 4 of our variables. So if we take a look at it now, you'll see that we have all 4 variables. So we're just basically combining those vectors above into that original data frame. So now, in order to create a subset of those original variables, we'll create a new data frame. I'll call this one, for lack of a better naming system, I'll call it df3, and then I'll type in an arrow followed by the name of the original data frame. And then inside, we'll create a bracket here. And then, as we were talking about before in terms of referencing columns, we can type comma and then a C, and then inside this parenthesis here, I'll reference the names of the variables that I want to include, making sure to include quotation marks around the names and separate them by commas. So in this case right here, I'll type in case ID in quotation marks, and then we'll type in inside quotation marks mastery. So let's just say those are the only 2 variables that I want to include in this this new data frame. So if I type in df3 right here, now we haven't run anything yet, but I'll just kind of show you really quickly. We'll run this, and then we'll click on df3 right here. We'll highlight that and run it. And so now you can see that we have only 2 variables, which are case ID and mastery. So there you go. Another option too would be to kind of reference the columns themselves. Or the column numbers. So let's say I use df4, and I'll use an arrow. I'll create an arrow df, and then comma C. And then in this particular case, let's say I want to look at incorporating columns 1 through 3. I would type 1, comma 2, comma 3. And we'll go ahead and highlight all of this and run it. And so now you can see that all 3 of those columns are incorporated. I'll give you one more example here. We could actually make this a little bit shorter by not using the C function, but instead, let's say we wanted to use columns 1 through 4. I could just type a 1:4 that represents columns 1 through 4. And then from there, you can see that we end up with columns 1 through 4 represented. So as you can see, as we've gone through this, we were able to demonstrate both, creating a new data frame by dropping variables, or creating a new data frame by, kind of identifying a subset of variables out of the original data frame and then creating a new data frame from that. So, keep in mind, underneath the video description, you'll find links to the files that I'm using in this particular video presentation right here. I will say too that I'll go ahead and save this right here as dropping and subsetting EX, as for example right there, and I'll make sure that that link is provided as well, or that a link to that is provided as well. And really quickly, just to let you know, if you do download that particular file and you click on it, double click on it, you'll get basically the commands that I've just written out. All of these right here is everything that we just talked through. So if you highlight all of this and you click on run, you'll get everything that we generated in this video presentation. So that pretty much wraps up this demonstration, and I appreciate you watching.